welcome you all here. I'm going to be doing an interview with Ben Long, and Ben Long is with Schlegel Long Rivera. Did you have a question, Ben?
No, I'm just saying good morning.
Oh, yes. Good morning to everyone. We're glad you're here, whether you're watching us live or whether you're watching us at a later time. Glad you're here. What I do know is we're going to be taking some of the most frequently asked questions that people have about estate planning, and they are going to be answered right here today. So I'm very excited about that. And Ben, why don't you tell us, Ben, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, I'll do that. But first, how about I introduce you, Lee? Would that be all right?
Okay, do that. Let's do that.
I'm very lucky to have you today, very happy and excited to have you. This is Lee Gray. She's actually my personal and our business's business coach. She's with Action Coach based out of Wichita, Kansas, but works all over the state. We worked with Lee for well over a year now. It's been a fantastic partnership.
Thank you.
Besides being a small business owner herself, Lee, counsels business owners, executives in all sorts of areas of management and business management. And so, Lee, we're just very happy to have you with me today, and thank you for helping me out.
So go ahead and introduce yourself, if you would. I probably have you do that. Yeah.
So, for those that don't know, my name is Ben. I'm an estate planner here at Schlegel Long Rivera. We're a law firm in downtown Olathe, Kansas, just outside Kansas City. I work in a couple areas of law, but most often I'm an estate planner and probate attorney. I've been doing that for over a decade. We have two estate planners here, myself and my law partner and father-in-law, George Schlegel. And we've been working together, like I said, for well over a decade. It's been a blessing to be able to work with my father-in-law. The joke I always say is Schlegel Long Rivera, the name of our firm, sounds better than Nepotism LLC. So.
I like that. Well, we're going to keep this to 20 minutes because we want to be conscious of people's time. We realize that sitting here for a while with us you may find you have some other things to do, but we're going to get to it and make it worth your while. So I'm going to go ahead and just dive right in to some questions, Ben, that I have prepared for you. The first one is, what is estate planning?
Well, I guess that's the big question, right? What is estate planning? And while there's all sorts of facets and different parts of estate planning, it's not what most people think. I think you can really boil it down to two different things. So estate planning, I think most people realize, is about managing your assets, managing your estate for something happens to you, when something happens to you one day when you pass away, but also if something happens to you, in the short term, if you have some kind of a disability for a period of time, managing assets during that time is very important. The other facet of estate planning is, most folks think estate planning deals with when you pass away. No, we do a lot of managing. Again, what if you go through some kind of disability? Who's going to care for you? Who's going to care for your assets? Who's going to care for your kids or step in and fill the roles that you're filling and help you out until you can take back over? That's a very important part of estate planning. So when we do estate plans, we look at all of those things.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I wonder if there's this fear that it's really a complex process. What documents are needed for estate planning?
Well, how about the famous lawyer answer? It depends.
Okay.
I can do better than that, because most often we're doing, for most people I meet with, I most often do the same kinds of documents. Of course, an estate plan consists of, I think most people realize, a last will and testament. That's one of the documents. Another document we sometimes use with estate plans is called the trust document. There's all kinds of trusts. And we don't always use trust with estate plans. Our whole motto here is we try to keep things as simple as possible. Mm-hmm. Trusts are very great tools, but only when they're necessary. Other documents that are often included in an estate plan are financial powers of attorney, sometimes called a durable power of attorney, a medical power of attorney, and a living will.
Okay. Well, that doesn't sound as scary as people might think. So Good, appreciate that. So here's another question. What is the role of an executor in estate planning?
An executor is the person that you name in your will, your last will and testament, and it's their job to work with the lawyer or probate court after you pass to make sure assets go where you want them to go. They're sort of the point person. They would do what you would do if you were able to, and making sure your wishes are carried out. But can I take this on a little side
Sure.
note? Because I've talked about a last will and testament, we've talked about the executor that's named in a will. Something that most folks don't realize. I mean, a lot of people believe that an estate plan, to have an estate plan, they need a will. And they think that's it. I get a will, my estate plan's done. Actually, the will is nothing more than a set of instructions for the probate judge. And we'll talk about probate here in a little bit, I'm sure. But one big goal of estate planning is to have your assets avoid probate. So again, I'll kind of pause this point. I'm sure we'll come back to it. But
okay, yes, I do.
There's a saying we estate planners use. It's called "Where there's a will, there's a probate." So wills are very important tools, but barely the first step in estate planning.
It's good to remember where there's a will, there's a probate. I'll remember that. Thank you. One other question, as I was preparing my questions for you today, was what is portability in estate planning?
So that's a pretty advanced question, but it is one that I get every now and then. Portability is a concept between a husband and a wife, or someone in a legal union, that involves when one passes. So when you pass, if your estate is subject to the estate tax, you have to have quite a bit of assets. I think for a married couple, it's over 20 million, and most of us will never come close to that. But some of our clients, very few do, and if you're in that arena, in that area, then one thing that you can do is when the first of you passes, each person has an exemption amount that doesn't get counted towards taxes, in other words, and you can port that exemption amount to your spouse. This also plays into something called the unlimited marital deduction. This concept we actually don't encounter very much today in estate planning. When the exemption amounts that I mentioned was 20 million, about 20 years ago, it was way, way, way lower. And this is something that we all had to worry about. We all had to do these complicated A/B trusts. So thankfully it's not the case anymore. It's something to be aware of, but usually most people don't need to worry about that concept.
I heard you say some tax language there. So is it safe to say that taxes and tax and estate planning are cousins? I mean, you have to be pretty aware of both a tax and estate, right? They're
absolutely
different, but very involved with one another.
Yeah, and probably something closer than cousins. Yeah, they
okay.
go hand in hand, really. I mean, every estate planner has to be well versed in the Internal Revenue Code, both in how trusts are taxed, how individuals are taxed, how things that are in someone's gross estate, and if there's a step up in basis. I won't go into it much farther, but yes, tax law is very important to an estate planner.
All right, that's really interesting. So you're not just an estate attorney; you're kind of really a specialist in the area of tax as it relates to the estate.
That's fair. Yeah.
So okay, appreciate that. So let me ask you this: does estate planning include wills?
Absolutely. Almost. I said a few minutes ago that's barely the first step in estate planning, but it's an absolutely necessary step. And why don't I use this to sort of ask a question that I'm sure you're getting to, and that's the word probate, because this kind of goes, again, hand in hand, to use that term again, with whether or not a will is necessary. So can I explain what probate is for a moment?
Yes.
Probate is a court process after you pass. So if a person passes away and they have an asset that's in their name, so let's say you own a house and you're married, but for whatever reason that house is just in your name. That's almost never the case. It's almost always jointly titled between husband and wife. But if that house was in just your name and you passed, well, even if you have a will, that house has to go through probate. Probate is where you go to the probate judge here in Johnson County or wherever you live, and you let the judge know someone passed away, but they had a will, so judge, this is their wishes. They wanted their assets to go to their spouse and their kids or whomever they listed in the will. In probate, is not a fun process. It's a public process. The filings are public, open to the public. You usually have waiting periods that we have to adhere to or want to adhere to. You have to pay a lawyer to go through probate. And so what we're trying to do, well, back to the house example. So one thing we can do, I mentioned if that house is in your name, then it has to go through probate. Well, it used to be you had to do trust to put houses in trust because things in trust avoid probate. But nowadays, You just grab the deed and you put on a transfer on death beneficiary on the deed. As opposed to doing a $4,000 trust, you do a $250 or $400 deed.
Okay.
And just make a transfer on death beneficiary to your kids or whomever you like, if this mechanism makes sense to you. And that's what the estate planner does. We go through all of your assets. We find those tricks, ways to put beneficiaries on assets so they all avoid probate. So yes, a will is necessary, because if you have to go to probate, a will shortens the time of probate. It lessens the cost of probate substantially. And it is a high risk that you'll have some asset you don't even realize you own, or that you don't get titled correctly or have a beneficiary applied correctly. So you want that will as a backup. But like I said, where there's a will, there's a probate. You have a will, and that's it. It's going to go through probate. You work with an estate planner to go through all of your assets to make sure that there's a beneficiary designation or something on those assets, so they avoid probate, or you do a trust, things like that.
So I know that the whole process of estate planning is emotional, and the death is emotional, and it's difficult for people to think about. But when you are able to resolve the technical issues, then you can just deal with the grief that you have. And is that one of the things that you get that you like about what you do, is that you can help people through that horrible process of not having a plan? Absolutely.
That is what my passion is. When people are in circumstance where, they are grieving, or they are, going through loss, or just being bombarded with all these steps and things they have to do, and probably one of the worst times to have to do it, I really enjoy being the person who has either set something up ahead of time to avoid all sorts of added stress and avoid the steps that are needed when someone passes away. Or of course, I'm there to help someone through that period of time. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's probably where my passion for helping people in the area of probate and estate planning come from.
Okay, good. Well, I have one last question. And then I want to make sure that everyone knows you're going to give us a way to contact you,
Sure.
The web and your phone number. And then I know we're going to be putting some information in this along with this on Facebook so that people can find it. If they can't find the document that we're going to attach for some reason or another, they can just call the office and we can get it to them, right?
Certainly, that's right.
Just if they want to inquiry and just have a conversation about this with you, because you're offering that, right? You're going to have a conversation with anybody who wants to talk about an estate. What does estate look like for them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And what that is, what you're talking about is it's a free, no pressure consultation. You fill out a questionnaire so I get to know a little bit about your assets, and then we just sit down. I think most folks are surprised by the end of that meeting how, even though it's a very a complicated area and there's so many moving parts, how accessible I can make it and boil it down to just a couple of important points. The way my firm works is, I've certainly write some documents, but we like to have you do a lot of the work too to save some time and cost. And I think everyone I work with feels empowered to do that for themselves. But that meeting that you're talking about, Lee, it usually lasts just about an hour. I see when people leave that meeting, they come to the meeting, I can see sometimes there's tension on their face or apprehension or what are we going to talk about? But when they leave that meeting, I see a look of relief or just comfort, or oftentimes I get the comment, "Wow, I'm really glad we did that. That was very helpful." And we move forward after that. It's entirely, like I said, no pressure. I just enjoy it.
So it is painless. I can attest that it is painless. So my last question is, so there may be someone listening who has an estate plan. How often do they need to get with someone like yourself to update the plan, make sure it's still legal and accurate and correct?
So I when someone works with me and puts together an estate plan, they get a couple of things. And one of those is, if there ever is a major change in law, I will send out a notice to my clients that we need to meet again. That hasn't really happened much in my career. It probably won't happen much, but if it does, just know that's there. Also, what you get when you sign up with me is when something happens to you temporarily or permanently, your family's invited to come meet with me for free, so I can tell them what they need to do and what you've put together for them. But back to your question, Lee. Did I answer your question, Lee?
How often do I have to get back into?
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. So those things aside, what I tell folks is, you come back to me when there is some sort of just a major life change. There's,
Okay.
you've got some more kids or grandkids, someone's
Like,
passed. Just
or
give
maybe
us a
you've
phone call.
inherited something that needs to be included in the trust now, or
Absolutely, yeah.
I have seen that happen too. So, well, that was my last question. Is there anything else you want to add before we give the address again and phone number for you and your way for them to reach? Is there anything you want to add before we finish today?
I would just say this, Lee. I didn't start out an estate planner. I've been doing it for about 10 years, but for the first couple of years that I practiced, I was primarily just a probate lawyer, which means I was helping folks after there was a disaster, after someone passed. When there was a problem, I was helping folks clean it up. And my story is, and you can see this on our website, and I enjoy that work, and it's very necessary. But I would be, I don't know, a year or so into some of these probates and thousands of legal expenses in, and thinking, man, if we just had some estate planning in place, if we just had a power of attorney, if we just had the right will here, we would have avoided all this. And so my passion pretty quickly morphed into doing estate planning things ahead of time. And folks don't realize, unless you've gone through it, unless you, your parents, someone you love has gone through this type of an ordeal, you don't realize how expensive and just how involved this is, and how much can be avoided. Usually it's just that meeting with me is what really kicks this off. So Lee, the one thing I can say is, I certainly want you to come meet with me, but if not with me, meet with some estate planner,
Okay.
because it's so important. So that's what I'll close with, Lee.
Well, I can definitely feel the passion, even on this virtual call that we're on, that you have for that. And I appreciate that very much. As a business coach, I know that what you do day in and day out is much better and easier to serve when you are passionate about it, as you are. So thank you for that.
Thank
Well,
you.
so again, we'll close. I'll say my name is Lee Gray. I'm an action coach, business coach. I'm based in Wichita. I serve clients all over the state of Kansas. This is Ben Long, and he's with Schlegel, Long, and Rivera. And Ben, go ahead and give us your web address.
Sure. It's www.kansaslegalteam.com. You can visit us there, see our estate planning page, or for those of you that are here in the webinar or watching us on Facebook Live or seeing the video that's going to be up later, check out the comments. We put a quick link to a Google form we prepared. If you just want to shoot us your name and a way to reach you, we'll reach out and set up that meeting we've been talking about, that quick meeting, so that we can talk about what will work for you and how we can keep your family out of court and out of conflict.
Wonderful. So say the web address one more time, and then we'll close.
Sure. It's kansaslegalteam.com.
I like that. I think that's easy to remember. Well, thank you very much for your time today. And I will look forward to hearing more, because I'd like to ask you some more questions and dive a little deeper into some of the things that we discussed today. And based on the feedback that we get from the viewers and listeners, we will include your questions the next time we do this. So until we see you again, have a happy day and be blessed.
You as well. Thanks so much, Lee.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
We'll talk to you
everybody.
later.